She did not fall from a cliff. She did not drown in the river. She was destroyed by the one person in this world who was supposed to protect her, her own mother. A king had chosen her above all women in the land, and her mother could not bear it. So she made sure her daughter would never wear a crown. But what the mother buried in the dark, the river remembered. And the river does not lie. The morning the king's messengers rode into the village of Odom, every woman stepped outside her door. Their robes were gold, their horses were tall and black, and in the hands of the lead messenger was a scroll sealed, with red wax, the mark of the palace. The village held its breath. The messenger read the words slowly, clearly, so that even the oldest grandmother at the back of the crowd could hear. The king was searching for a bride, not from among the noble families, not from the city, from the villages, from the common people. And the woman he chose would become queen of the entire kingdom. Every mother in Odom turned to look at her daughter, but only one woman felt something cold move through her chest when she heard those words. Not joy, not pride, fear. Her name was Constance, and the daughter she was looking at, the daughter every eye in the crowd had already turned toward, was Amara, and Constance could not allow that. Before we continue, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story. Now, and tell us from where you are watching us. Let us go back to where this all began. King Kofi ruled the kingdom of Asantewa from a palace carved from golden stone on the hill above the great river. He was 32 years old, broad-shouldered, with eyes that carried the weight of a man who had seen too much grief too early. His father had died when Kofi was 19. His mother had followed 2 years later. He had been king for 11 years, and in all those years he had never found a woman who made him feel less alone. His advisors brought him daughters of chiefs. His aunties arranged meetings with beautiful women from noble houses. He sat with all of them, spoke with all of them, and felt nothing. Not because he was cold, because he was waiting for something real, something that could not be performed or arranged or purchased. His chief advisor, a wise old man named Ebo, had finally said to him one evening as they sat beside the river, "My king, the woman you are looking for does not live where you have been searching. She lives where no one has thought to look." And so the king sent his messengers to the villages. Now Amara. She was 20 years old and she lived in a house with a leaking roof and a floor of packed red earth. She woke before sunrise every morning to carry water from the river. 2 large clay pots balanced on a wooden frame across her narrow shoulders, the cold pre-dawn air raising goosebumps on her skin. She did this not once, not twice, but 3 times each morning before the rest of the village stirred. She was the most beautiful woman in Odom, not in the way of painted faces and borrowed jewels, in the way of a woman who has never been told. She is beautiful and therefore moves through the world without armor, open, warm, laughing easily, helping freely. She would stop to help an old man carry firewood. She would share her last piece of yam with a hungry child. She sang while she worked, low and sweet the way the river sounds at night, and her mother Constance knew all of this. Constance had known it for years, and it had been eating her alive for years. Constance had once been beautiful too. She told herself this often, alone in her room at night. She had been beautiful, and then life had taken it from her. Poverty, hardship, disappointment, a husband who left. And now here was Amara, still young, still glowing, still untouched by bitterness. It was a mirror Constance could not look into without flinching. When the king's messengers arrived in Odom and every eye turned to Amara, including the lead messengers who stopped reading the scroll and simply stared, something inside Constance cracked open, not with pride, with rage. Her daughter, about to become queen. And Constance? She would be the queen mother, the woman behind the throne, the woman who would finally be seen, finally be honored, finally be elevated, but only if she allowed it. And already, even as the crowd cheered and the messenger looked at Amara with wonder, Constance's mind was moving in another direction entirely. She was already thinking of a way to make sure her daughter never sat on that throne. Something was wrong. The village could feel it. But no one was looking at the mother. Everyone was looking at the daughter. That was their first mistake. 3 days after the king's messengers arrived, Amara was summoned to the palace. She wore the only good dress she owned, a simple blue wrap her grandmother had given her, the color of deep water. She had no jewelry, no gold, nothing to signal status or wealth. She walked the long road to the palace with her back straight and her chin level, the way her grandmother had taught her. Never bow before you are bowed to, child. Walk like the earth belongs to you because it does. The palace gates were taller than 3 men. The guards wore red and gold. The floor inside was polished white stone, cool beneath her bare feet. Everything about the place was designed to make a person feel small. Amara did not feel small. King Kofi sat in his great chair at the far end of the receiving hall, surrounded by his court. 20 women had already been presented to him that week. He had smiled politely at all of them and felt nothing. He was already preparing himself to feel nothing again. Then Amara walked in. Time stopped. The court stopped. Kofi's hands, which had been resting loosely on the arms of his chair, went still. She did not look around at the gold or the height of the ceilings. She walked toward him steadily, and when she reached the appropriate distance, she did not bow in the dramatic, practiced way the other women had. She simply inclined her head warmly, the way you greet someone you respect, as though he were a person, not a throne. No one had done that. Kofi leaned forward. "What is your name?" "Amara, my king, from the village of Odum." "Are you afraid?" She looked at him directly. "Should I be?" A sound moved through the court. Surprise, amusement, a few indrawn breaths. But Kofi's face did not change. Something behind his eyes, however, something long locked, shifted. "No," he said quietly. "You should not be." They spoke for 2 hours. 2 hours. The court had never seen the king speak to any woman for more than 20 minutes. They spoke about the river, about the weight of responsibility, about what it means to carry something heavy for the people you love. At one point, Amara said something that made Kofi laugh, a real laugh, unexpected from deep in his chest, and 2 of the older courtiers exchanged a look of pure disbelief. When Amara left the palace that evening, Kofi turned to Ebo and said simply, "Her." Ebo smiled. "I know, my king." The royal messengers rode back to Odum the next morning carrying a formal proposal. The entire village exploded with celebration. Women sang in the road. Children ran in circles. Old men nodded and said they had always known Amara was special. But in the small house with the leaking roof, Constance sat very still. She held the proposal scroll in her hands and read it twice. Then she set it down on the table and sat with her hands folded, her face unreadable, while her daughter wept tears of shock and joy in the next room. Constance did not go in to comfort her. She was thinking. She was thinking about herself, about her own face, her own body, her own long-faded beauty. She was thinking about what it would feel like to stand beside her daughter in the palace and watch everyone bow to Amara while she, Constance, stood 2 steps behind. She was thinking about all the years she had suffered, all the years she had gone without, all the years no one had chosen her. And then, and this is the part that should make your blood run cold, Constance smiled. Not the smile of a proud mother. The smile of a woman who had just decided something terrible. She stood up. She straightened her dress. And she went into the next room where Amara was still crying with joy, and she held her daughter's face in her hands and said very gently, "My love, this is wonderful news. I am so happy for you." The lie came out perfectly. The next morning, before Amara was even awake, Constance had left the house. She was seen walking alone on the road toward the edge of the forest, toward the old woman who lived at the boundary between the village and the deep trees. The woman no one spoke about. The woman people only visited when they wanted something done in darkness. No one thought to mention this to Amara. Why would they? She was going to be queen. The preparations for Amara's arrival at the palace took 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, the king sent gifts to the village every day. Fine cloth, baskets of food, palm oil in sealed clay jars, a pair of gold earrings for Amara that the whole village passed around just to touch. Amara received all of it with the same quiet grace she had carried all her life. She shared the food with her neighbors. She let the children try on the earrings. She did not change. She remained exactly who she was. And Constance watched it all, smiling at the right moments, hugging her daughter at the right moments, playing the part of the proud and grateful mother so completely that even Amara, who knew her mother well, saw nothing wrong. On the 14th day, the morning before Amara was to leave for the palace, Constance rose before dawn. She moved quietly through the house in the grey dark. She went to a locked box she kept beneath her sleeping mat, a small wooden box that Amara had never been permitted to touch. She opened it with a key she wore around her neck. Inside was a small cloth pouch, tied shut with red thread. Constance had paid the old woman at the forest's edge a price she had been saving for years, gold pieces she had hidden from her daughter, scraped together over many seasons of sacrifice. What the old woman had given her in return was in this pouch. She carried it to the kitchen. She prepared Amara's morning tea herself, something she had not done in years. She brewed the herbs, poured the hot water, and then, with steady hands that did not shake even once, she opened the pouch and mixed its contents into the cup. She stirred it until it dissolved completely. No color, no smell, nothing. Then she carried it to Amara's room, knocked gently, and said with warmth in her voice, "Wake up, my love. I made your tea. It's your last morning in this house. Let me do something for you." Amara sat up, her face soft with sleep and love. She took the cup with both hands. She looked at her mother with such open gratitude, such trust, that for just one moment, one single moment, Constance's hand trembled. Then Amara drank. By the time the royal carriage arrived at midday, Amara's throat had begun to close. It started slowly, a tightening, a roughness when she swallowed, a strange heaviness at the base of her neck. She told herself it was nerves. She told herself it was the emotion of leaving home. She climbed into the carriage and waved goodbye to the village, and Constance stood at the front of the crowd, waving back, her face composed and kind. By the time the carriage reached the palace gates, Amara could not speak above a whisper. By the following morning, she could not speak at all. The palace physicians came. They examined her throat, her tongue, her eyes. They found nothing they recognized. No fever, no swelling they could explain, no wound. They gave her honey and herbs and rest. They told the king it was most likely the shock of the transition, the stress of change. Common in young women, they said, who move suddenly into elevated circumstances. The king sat beside Amara's bed for 3 hours that night. He held her hand. She looked at him with eyes that were completely clear, not confused, not feverish, fully present, just silent. "I will wait," he told her quietly in the dark. "However long it takes." She pressed his hand, but the voice did not come back. 6 days after Amara arrived at the palace, an old woman from Odom appeared at the palace gates. She was small and bent, with white hair wrapped in a dark cloth. Her name was Grandmother Efua. She had been Amara's grandmother's closest friend, and she had traveled the long road alone because she could not sleep. She asked to speak to the king's chief advisor, Ebo, not the king. Ebo. She was wise enough to know that some conversations must go through the right door. Ebo received her in a small room near the palace garden, where the jasmine grew thick against the stone wall and the air smelled of evening flowers. Grandmother Efua sat down. She folded her hands. She said, "I need to tell you what I saw, because if I die without telling someone, the truth will die with me, and I cannot carry that weight to my grave." Ebo leaned forward. She told him. She had seen Constance before dawn on the morning Amara left. She had seen Constance leave the house, walk through the village, and enter the kitchen before any other light was burning. She had thought nothing of it at the time. An early morning, a mother preparing. But then she had heard something. The sound of the locked box being opened. "I know that box," Grandmother Efua said quietly. "I knew her mother before she became this woman. That box has been locked for 20 years. Nothing that comes out of a locked box on a morning like that is innocent." Ebo was very still. "And there is something else," she said. She opened the small bag she carried at her side and placed a folded piece of cloth on the table. Inside the cloth was a small amount of dark fine powder, the same powder Constance had asked the old woman in the forest to prepare. Grandmother Efua had found it at the edge of the cooking fire, a pinch that had spilled unnoticed. She had not known what it was, but she had saved it, because her bones told her to save it. Ebo called the palace's oldest physician to the room. The physician looked at the powder for a long time. He smelled it. He touched a tiny amount to the back of his hand and waited. Then he looked up at Ebo with an expression that Ebo would not forget for the rest of his life. "This is a silencing root," the physician said. "It does not kill the body. It kills the voice, permanently. The person who drank this," he paused, "they will never speak again." For 48 hours the king sent healers and remedies. He summoned the greatest physician from the northern city, who examined Amara with careful hands and asked her to attempt sounds she had not tried. And on the second evening, under the physician's instruction, Amara managed to produce a thin, fragile note, barely a breath, barely a sound. The court rejoiced. The king closed his eyes with relief. The physician said with cautious optimism that perhaps the damage was not total. Perhaps with time, with treatment, something could return. It seemed for one night that the storm might pass. Then the physician came to Ebo privately before dawn and said, "I made her feel hope because she needed to feel hope. But I will not lie to you, old friend. The root has done its work. Even if some small sound returns, and it may, the voice she was born with is gone. Someone meant to silence her permanently, and whoever it was knew exactly what they were doing." Ebo brought the powder to a merchant who traveled between the villages and the city. The merchant recognized it immediately. He told Ebo where it could be obtained, not from any market, not from any healer, only from one person, a woman who lived at the edge of the forest outside the village of Odom. And she did not deal in small transactions. She dealt in fear, in desperation, in the kind of payment that only comes from someone who wants something done forever, not temporarily. Ebo sent a trusted man to find this woman. She was not easy to find, but she was found. And when she was shown the official seal of the king's chief advisor, she understood that the time for secrets had ended. She described her visitor, a woman, middle-aged, with tight, controlled movements and cold eyes. She had paid in gold, not the small gold of modest people, but pieces that had been carefully hoarded. She had known exactly what she wanted. She had used the word permanent. She said she wanted silence, the old woman at the forest's edge told Ebo's man. She said her daughter talked too much. She said she wanted peace in her house. But they both knew that was not the truth. Ebo sat with this information for 1 hour before he brought it to the king. He needed that hour, because what he was about to tell King Kofi was not simply a crime. It was a horror. A mother had silenced her own daughter, not out of madness, not out of poverty, not out of survival, but out of jealousy. Because her daughter was chosen, because a king had looked at her child and seen something worth honoring, and the mother could not bear to be in the shadow of that. She had taken her daughter's voice before her daughter could use it to say, "I do." When Ebo finished speaking, King Kofi sat in complete silence for a very long time. The fire in the brazier beside him was the only sound in the room, crackling softly as though even it was being careful. Then the king stood up. His face was not the face of anger. It was something colder than anger, something much more dangerous. "Bring her to me," he said. "Bring Constance here." Constance arrived at the palace 2 days later. She had been told only that the king wished to honor her as the mother of his chosen bride. She had dressed carefully, her best cloth, borrowed earrings, her hair wrapped high. She smelled of shea butter and pride. She walked through the palace gates with her chin raised and her hands folded, ready to be celebrated. She was brought into a room she did not expect. It was not the throne room. It was not a banquet hall. It was a small plain room with stone walls and a single window that let in a shaft of grey morning light. At the table sat King Kofi, and beside him sat Ebo, and on the table between them sat 3 things: the cloth containing the powder, a written testimony from the old woman at the forest's edge, and a small wooden box, the box from beneath Constance's sleeping mat, which had been collected from her home the previous day. Constance looked at the table. Something moved across her face, too fast to name, and then it was gone. She composed herself. "My king," she said warmly. "What an honor." "Sit down," Kofi said. The warmth in his voice was gone entirely. Constance sat. We will not waste time, Kofi said. Tell me what is in this powder. Constance looked at the cloth pouch as though she had never seen it before. I don't know what that is, my king. Tell me why your daughter cannot speak. The physician said, Tell me why your daughter cannot speak, Constance. A long silence. The morning light was cold. The room smelled of stone and something metallic, like fear or like justice about to arrive. She was nervous, Constance said finally. Young women sometimes lose their voices when they are frightened. It is natural. The woman at the edge of the forest identified you, Ebo said quietly. She described your face, your movements, the gold you paid. She signed a testimony with her mark. Constance went absolutely still. Your daughter's tea, the king said. The morning she left for this palace. You made it yourself, you were seen. The box was found. The powder was identified. We are not asking if you did this. We are asking why. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Then, slowly, like a wall developing a crack, Constance's composure began to change. Not to remorse, to something uglier. She had everything, Constance said. The warmth was gone from her voice too now. What was underneath it was raw and terrible. She had everything without trying. Her face, her walk, her way. People looked at her and forgot I was in the room. My own daughter. I carried her, I fed her, I suffered for her. And she never once thought about what it cost me to be beside her and be invisible. And so you took her voice, Kofi said. Constance stopped. You wanted to break what you could not have, he said. You could not take back her face or her kindness, but you could take her voice. You could make sure she arrived here unable to speak, unable to charm me, unable to be what she is. And you told yourself it was something else, some kind of justice, some kind of evening of the score. Constance said nothing. She trusted you, the king said. His voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper, which made it more powerful than any shout. She took the cup from your hands. She looked at you with love on her face, and she drank what you gave her, and you watched her do it. The king stood. He was not a man who raised his voice. He did not need to. I have ruled this kingdom for 11 years, he said. I have seen greed destroy men. I have seen jealousy ruin families. I have seen powerful people commit terrible acts to hold on to their power. But I have never, not in 11 years, sat across a table from a woman who silenced her own child, her own blood, the person she was supposed to love before anyone else in this world. He leaned forward slightly. You wanted to be seen. You wanted to matter. I understand that ache. Every person carries it. But you did not choose to heal it. You chose to wound someone who had done nothing wrong except be born with a light you could not put out. Constance's eyes were wet now. But Kofi was not done. Her voice is gone because of you. And there is no powder in any forest in this kingdom that will give it back. He straightened. You will be held in this palace until the full council has heard this testimony. And you will face what you have done in front of witnesses in the light, because everything you tried to do in darkness deserves to be seen. He turned and walked toward the door. Then he stopped. He turned back just once. She still loves you, he said quietly. Even now she does not know the full truth of what you did. And when she learns it, and she will learn it, the grief of that knowledge will fall on her, not on you, because that is what you left her with. Not silence, grief. He left the room. If this story is moving you, subscribe now. The ending will change how you see everything. The Council of Elders met 3 days later in the great hall of the palace. Grandmother Efwa was brought from Odum and given a seat of honor. The physician gave his testimony. The old woman from the forest's edge gave hers. The evidence was laid out piece by piece in the clear, unambiguous light of public truth. Constance sat and heard every word, and across the hall, in a chair beside the king, Amara sat too, because Kofi had decided she deserved to hear it, not to be protected from it, to hear it, because it was her story and she had the right to know its full shape. When the physician explained what the powder did, when he used the words permanent and deliberate and designed to silence, Amara's hand found the arm of her chair and held it. Her face did not crumble. It became very, very still. The kind of stillness that comes after something inside a person breaks quietly without sound. She could not cry out. She could not say her mother's name. She had no voice to do it with. She could only look. And she looked at Constance, across that hall, with eyes that carried every unspeakable word. Constance looked back. And in that long silent exchange between mother and daughter, in that wordless space that the powder had made permanent, something happened that no one in the hall could fully describe afterward, but everyone felt. A reckoning, a grief, a farewell, not the farewell of death, the farewell of the end of a love that had been carrying too much for too long, a love that had been used badly, trusted too completely, and finally irrevocably broken. Amara looked away first. She turned her face toward the king. And King Kofi, who had been watching her with an expression of such careful, quiet tenderness, reached over and placed his hand over hers on the arm of the chair. She let him. The council's verdict was delivered at midday. Constance was stripped of all gifts she had received from the palace. She was formally barred from the palace grounds for a period of 5 years. She was returned to Odum under escort, where the village, which now knew everything, received her in heavy silence. No celebration, no welcome. Just the weight of what she had done, settling around her like dust. And in the palace, 3 weeks after the council's verdict, King Kofi married Amara. There were no grand speeches, no elaborate ceremony of vows, because what would vows have added? He had already declared everything in that small grey room, standing across from a woman he had never met, saying, "She still loves you." Those words were not spoken to Constance. They were spoken to the watching universe, a testimony to the character of the woman he was choosing. Amara wore white and gold. She wore the earrings the king had sent to the village, the ones every child in Odum had touched with wondering fingers. Her grandmother's blue wrap was folded and placed in a box of honor at her side, because it had been the cloth she wore on the day a king first saw her. She could not say "I do" aloud. She wrote it, in a clean, steady hand, on a small piece of paper that the king received and pressed to his chest. Then he looked at her and said, quietly enough that only she could hear, "I heard it. The whole kingdom heard it." The drums began. The horn sounded. And the woman who had been silenced became queen, not by her voice but by her character, not by anything that could be taken away, but by everything that could not. A year passed. In the palace of Asantewa, Queen Amara built a room that the king's court had never seen before. Not a throne room, not a receiving hall. A room with low-cushioned seats and open windows and a small fountain in the corner whose water ran over smooth river stones and made a sound like someone humming. She called it the listening room. It was for petitions from common people, people who had no power, no voice, no connections to the palace, people who had been turned away by the system and had run out of places to go. They came to this room and sat with the queen, and she listened, truly listened, her eyes steady and warm. And she wrote their situations down in careful, beautiful script, and she made sure they were heard. The people of the kingdom called her the silent queen who hears everything. They did not mean it as a sadness. They meant it as a crown. Grandmother Efua was brought to live at the palace in a quiet suite with a garden view. She spent her days in the sun and her evenings with Amara, communicating in the language of old friends, gestures, expressions, written notes, laughter that needed no sound. She said before she died 2 years later at a very great age, that these were the most peaceful years of her life. King Kofi learned the hand language that palace scholars had documented from a community of people in the eastern province who had always communicated this way. He learned it privately with a tutor over 6 months, and when he had learned enough, he surprised Amara one evening in the listening room by telling her, with his hands, that she was the most eloquent person he had ever known, that her silence had taught him to listen in a way 20 years of talking never had. She answered him, her hands moving, quick and light and warm. He laughed, and in the village of Odum, Constance lived a quiet life. She worked, she ate, she slept. The village was not cruel to her. They were simply honest. They treated her the way we treat a wound that has healed but left a scar, carefully with the full knowledge of what happened. On the day her grandchild was born, the queen's first child, a daughter with her mother's eyes, Constance received a small package from the palace. Inside was a painted miniature of the baby and a note written in Amara's handwriting. The note said only 4 words. She has your eyes, no more, no less. No. Some will say that was too much kindness. Some will say it was exactly the right amount. What I will say is this. A woman who was silenced chose to speak in the end with the only voice that could not be taken. The voice of who she was. And that voice, the whole kingdom heard. The woman who tried to bury her daughter in darkness did not understand one thing. Light does not disappear when it is covered. It only waits. Thank you for joining us for this story. If it touched your heart, please leave a comment below and tell us what moved you most. Subscribe to our channel and click the bell so you never miss a story. And when you are ready, watch our next story here. Until then, walk well and remember, what is true cannot stay hidden forever.